This is a Dynamics 365 podcast focusing on the ingredients of a successful Dynamics 365 practice. Your host is Business Solution MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn by searching for NZ365 Guy, or if you want to engage my professional services, go to cloverbase.com. For more information on this interview, show notes, feedback and resources mentioned, or to suggest a guest for future episodes, please go to nz365guy.com/podcast. Thanks to Kingsway Soft for sponsoring the Dynamics 365 Practice Podcast. Kingsway Soft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 70 countries and regions rely on Kingsway Soft to integrate data with various business systems in order to drive their business efficiency and leverage their information assets. Kingsway Soft is a leading provider of Microsoft Dynamics integration software, including Dynamics 365, CRM, AX, NAV, GP, SL, as well as many other applications. Check out their version 6 release of the SSIS prod featuring 7 new components, including support for Azure Blob Storage, Google Sheets, and a new Data Profiler transformation component. Hi everyone, I'm here with Koen van Vyver, and in this episode we're going to be focusing on pre-sales and Dynamics 365 practice growth. Koen is the Dynamics 365 team lead at ESC in Belgium. He specializes in Microsoft Dynamics 365 for sales, customer service, field service, and project service automation. He is commercially focused, understands the balance between client expectations and delivering within the agreed budgets and timescales. He's a communicator and motivator, able to get the best out of his team through skillful interaction and proactive team building around the goal of each project. Koen, thanks for coming on the Dynamics 365 Practice Podcast.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm very happy to be here, very honored to be here, and I'm really looking forward to a nice conversation with you.
It's good to have you on the show. I'd like to start with a quote that comes from your blog, The CRM Giant, which says, "Bringing craftsmanship to the CRM trade." Now, that is a quote that really resonates with me, as I've talked many times with my team about being craftsperson and not just a consultant. What does it mean to you, and how do you see a difference in your mind?
So you have on one side, you have, for me, a consultant, so a Dynamics 365 consultant. And then at the other hand, you have a Dynamics 365 craftsperson. The difference between those two, for me, is a consultant has a 9-to-5 mentality. It's his job. He does it. Okay, what do you do? Oh, my job is to be a Dynamics 365 consultant. And he is more or less always, for me, a bit retroactive. What do I mean by that? Is like, if you ask him something, he will give you an answer. However, let's take the opposite, which is for me a craftsperson. For me, Dynamics 365 isn't a 9-to-5 mentality. It's a 24-hour mentality. You live it, you breathe it, you drink it. You look at the blogs, you listen to podcasts like yours. You're always busy with it. And you're also towards your customers, so towards your colleagues, you're always proactive, looking for new things, maybe telling to your customers who don't have a need yet, like, oh, this is a new functionality in version 9. This might be interesting for you because you're doing this or this. So it's a whole different mind game. And of course, a craftsman is, by definition, a person who practices or is highly skilled in a craft. So I think you really need to up your game. And for me, it's a bit like comparing it with a blacksmith, or I'm not quite sure if the pronunciation is correct, a furniture maker, somebody who makes furnitures. And I'm not quite sure if you have ever read the biography from Steve Jobs, from Walter Isaacson. There is a little small story in there, which goes about how Steve Jobs was very mad at how the motherboards in the first Macs were created. So they were very sloppy created. They worked, but they were sloppy. And the reason why Jobs was so mad is because his father was also a furniture maker. And he spent a lot of time at making his closets and making his furniture. Even if you don't see it, like the back of a closet, if you have a big closet, nobody sees the back. So you can do actually with it what you want. But you can use very cheap material, or you can use expensive material to make it. And for me, that's the same with Dynamics. You can write workflows which are very sloppy, which don't have any description on how they work, what they do, all that kind of stuff. So I think quality as a craftsperson is everything. I think we really need to step up the game for a lot of consultants and really be proactive with the Dynamics 365 environment.
I totally agree. As in, you've articulated it perfectly. Can you tell us a bit more about you? You know, what's your Dynamics experience? What have you done thus far in the Dynamics, working with Dynamics 365?
So I actually started my career in Dynamics Navision a whole couple of years ago, but the Dynamics Navision environment wasn't really my cup of tea. So I switched gears, I think it was in April 2014, to Dynamics CRM, as the company I was working in saw potential in Dynamics. Back then, for ESC, it was quite a new game. So I started in 2014 with the first, not the really first, but Dynamics CRM 4.0, followed by 2011, 13, 15, 16. Wow. So I have worked, except for the very first version of Dynamics CRM, I have worked with all of them.
Excellent. What type of roles are you typically working within?
Yeah, I started actually, I think as a lot of people do, just in support. So, okay, you have an issue, let's try to solve that issue. And more or less your experience grows by these questions or complaints or cases you get. After that, I switched gears a bit, and then I became also actually the functional consultant, the business analyst. Now I'm more or less switching gears since this year to a more Dynamics 365 team lead role, in which I'm building a team which is really up for the challenges which are coming our way with all the new goodies that Microsoft is bringing. So whereas my focus earlier on was like, okay, on support and solving cases, my focus now is on pre-sales. So really getting to know new people, getting to solve their issues with Dynamics 365. Project management wise, getting projects actually worked out, getting them delivered, and team lead wise, leading people in the Dynamics 365 world. And I must say, I have been reading a lot of your blog posts concerning Dynamics 365, concerning the roles, concerning the teams, concerning building your team. So that has been really interesting.
And so when you're not working, what do you spend your time on?
My time has recently been picked up by one thing. My wife and I are expecting our first child in June. So,
congratulations.
Thank you. So we have been preparing for it, getting all the stuff, reading some books, painting the room, all those kind of silly things. That's one. Other thing which always picks up my interest is just reading about leadership, about negotiation, about teams. So really practical issues I'm now facing, and I do hope maybe through this podcast I can interact with some other people who are having the same issues or having the same challenges. Also experiencing with some new technology. I think Dynamics 365 is really stepping up the game. If we're talking about, let's say, machine learning, all those kind of stuff, I think it's really fascinating what is going on. And I think we have a very bright future. And then two other things I do. I had a bit of a blog sabbath because of the baby and working in my house. So now I'm picking up my blogging again. And of course, you need a healthy mind and a healthy body. So I try to also do some training. I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu.
Wow.
I give training and I receive training. So that also tries to keep up the body.
Wow. Keeping you busy then.
Yes, I'm always a bit hyper and always busy. So, really trying to keep as busy as possible.
Excellent. Let's take a bit of a chat about pre-sales. I understand you have a lot of experience in pre-sales for Dynamics 365. Pre-sales can have different meanings to different people. Can you tell me what pre-sales means in your mind?
Yeah, I think, as you said, pre-sales differs for a lot of people, and I think it differs from organization to organization. For me, in general, it's about preparing a solution or a proposal based on possible requirements from the customer. To give you an example, this morning I had a nice talk with people who are interested in Dynamics 365. They're a Belgium startup, and they were interested in seeing how can Dynamics 365 solve some of our issues or some of our challenges we're having because we're growing very fast. and the system we have now doesn't comply with the issues we have, so we are looking for something new. So that's one thing. So the solution preparation. So another thing, of course, is then demonstrating the product, showing what it can do. This usually means building a proof of concept. I think a lot of people also say for pre-sales, it's creating marketing documents. For me itself, It's less. I'm not a marketeer, but I do speak with our marketing guy on, okay, how can we build a website to make it more interesting, or how can we make brochures or other kind of stuff? And of course, for me, pre-sales is also a bit about analysis. Just to be clear, myself, I'm not the first contact with the customer. That's for my colleagues who are sales consultants. They are looking for hot leads, cold leads, all that kind of stuff. For me, I'm usually, let them identify first, is this somebody who needs Dynamics 365? And then we can talk about, how can Dynamics 365 solve those needs you have?
Excellent. So how did you go about getting into pre-sales? Is there any training materials that you've done or can recommend?
I'm not really sure if you can train for a pre-sales role. And everything I say today is purely from my own opinion. I wasn't trained myself. I do, however, have a background in sales and marketing. I had higher education in sales and marketing. But I usually think you need a combination of certain skills. And I think you need a combination of 3 kind of skills. First one being is product knowledge. As a pre-sales consultant, I do think you need to know how does Dynamics 365 work? What can it do? A second one or second skill is the industry and value knowledge. So do you know what industry this company is in? Do you know the industry? Do you know the challenges they are having? How knowledgeable are you in it? And then I think a third skill is about having some, maybe more soft skill wise, having some presentation and people skills. If you can combine those 3, and then maybe a fourth one, which is overruling over those 3, is like creating trust and credibility. Because at the end of the road, you as a consultant, you want to go to a partnership with your customer. I think you're going on a road together, and that usually means having trust in each other and knowing where to go.
That's really, really well put together. So what resources would you recommend for people that want to move from Dynamics 365 consulting role into a pre-sales role? So in other words, they pretty much know Dynamics, but they want to now transition roles into a pre-sales role.
I think first and foremost, you need to have some soft skills. I know a lot of our technical guys who are quite knowledgeable on Dynamics 365, but if you put them together with a customer or with a potential customer, they will freeze. They won't be able to talk with the person. So I do think you need to work on your soft skills, whether or not this means taking a sort of course. That's up to you. For me personally, I had a lot of help, definitely with giving presentations, watching TEDx talks. So I think they're all on YouTube available. There are a lot of good ones. And if you just watch people presenting, they're very knowledgeable. They can explain their story. I think that's very interesting to just start with it. And of course, visiting, for example, Dynamics 365 congresses. There's a lot of presentations from CRM MVPs, which you can watch online or maybe in real life, and just picking up how are they doing it, noticing maybe small things they're doing to get themselves comfortable or to get the person to trust them. And I mean trust in a good way, not as in a slick salesperson way, but as in a trustful way.
So what's the toughest element of working in pre-sales?
For me, short story, failure. The toughest element for me is you have been putting a lot of time in, let's say, in a pre-sales trajectory, and you made it a proof of concept. You have given one demo, a second one, a third one, a fourth one. You have crafted your estimation, your proposal. You have been really working on it. And then maybe, and that's of course the sales game, maybe at the end of the road, it doesn't come through and the potential customer chooses somebody else. For me, in the first years of when I was doing pre-sales, this was a tough lesson to learn, to just say, okay, on to the next one. Nothing happened. Let's look for the other one.
Interesting. Can you give me some insight on how you go about demonstrating the capabilities of Dynamics 365 to a customer? So step us through the steps that you take to set up that proof of concept environment to ultimately demonstrating it.
Yeah, first thing is knowing what or who is the customer. We talked about a little bit earlier about having industry knowledge. So really know who and what about are you talking. For me, the most important lesson I learned, and what's from some of my colleagues who said, and those are more the really hardcore sales guy, is to tell a story. So tell a story, have some kind of scenario in which the customer will recognize himself. Use the knowledge you have about the industry and tell a story. Tell them, okay, customer A comes to you, but maybe you create an opportunity for it because he comes to you, but he also tells you he has watched at a competitor. So, okay, we have the competitor, we have the opportunity, we have the customer, and then you can talk about the sales flow. Okay, so you created the first quote for him. Okay, you created then an order and then an invoice. So that's how you can fairly easy tell the story on how they can make their own sales process into Dynamics 365. So usually the setup for me is first I'm being briefed by my sales colleague about what are the requirements, what are they looking for, and then we can talk with them and really listen firsthand. Okay, what are you looking for? How do you want the system? And then make up the proof of concept, come back, present the proof of concept. And then, of course, another key point for me was knowing who to aim at. What do I mean by this? Is you're not always aware of who is who at the table you're talking to. In the past, I was very focused on maybe just on the CEO, but maybe the CEO isn't the guy who is actually deciding. Maybe he's letting his sales guy decide. So you're talking actually to the wrong person. So you need to be able to read the room, swiftly change maybe your focus, but of course don't let the others just sitting there and really spend focus to all of them.
So how do you make sure your demo is better than, for example, a Salesforce.com is demoing or other competitors?
Personally, I know we're here now for talking Dynamics, but I think Salesforce and Dynamics are the top two solutions in the market. I think customers need to understand that at the end of the road, they both do the same. So they're both nice packages. And I think, and this is a discussion we can have indefinitely, you need to choose between a Porsche or a Ferrari. So if I make that comparison with a lot of people, they're like, okay, yeah, they're both fast cars. They have a lot of nice options. They have a lot of things they can do with it. Yeah, some people are more for this and some people are more for that. So for me, I'm usually going from my own strengths. I'm not looking to a competitor like Salesforce. If people are talking about, okay, yeah, but we are looking into Salesforce, then if we talk about the bigger picture in Dynamics, then I'm meaning, let's say, Office 365, let's say Exchange, we're talking SharePoint. And I think this is really the strength from Microsoft. If we look at the entire ecosystem, then I think you always have 1 foot ahead and then you'll always win. Even, for example, Dynamics is really now pouring, I think, money and budget in the relationship assistant, for instance. I think if I show this to a lot of people, they're always like, okay, it's a nice to have, but yeah, we'll definitely use it.
So how do you maintain your demo environments? Do you build a demo for each potential customer? And do you have instances with like Sandbox attached that you switch around? How do you go about that?
For me, everything is always about the customer or the potential customer. So I have several options. I do have 3 general demo environments, but those are just general demo environments which are set up in different ways. But of course, if a customer wants a more specific proof of concept, then we'll build a demo environment in which they can play, because we really invite our leads or our potential customers to like, okay, did you like what you see? Yeah. Do you want to play a bit with it? Okay, here are some login data. Your username, your password, just go into it. We'll come back in 1 or 2 weeks and then we'll see if you have more questions or what are your concerns. For us, this is a really big difference, because if you come back in 2 weeks and the prospect hasn't even played or hasn't even done the effort to play with it, then you know like, okay, this project is actually always doomed from in the beginning because they're not really attracted or they're not really into the software.
That's good. So what do you consider best practice around your demo environments?
A big lesson for me, don't use the real name of the company in the URL.
Yeah.
So don't use the real name. You will, if there would be a live organization, so don't use it. Just set test or demo or whatever behind it, but don't use the real name. I can't tell you how big of an issue I had in the past, in the early days, by doing this, so really don't do it. A second one for me is there are a lot of demo data nowadays in the environments, but they're usually a bit fuzzy. We have a lot of customers that if you're talking about, and we all know it, AdventureWorks, then the customer goes, okay, but who's AdventureWorks? They're not a customer from ours. I don't know them. Who are they? So you can just use it maybe in the background so your dashboards aren't blank, but please use your own demo data. Just make some real customers of theirs, make some real competitors, make some real opportunities, issues they might have. The customer will be much more satisfied. Even if you get it wrong, they will be much more recognizable for them, and they will much faster be on your terms and thinking with you, okay, yeah, you did it like this because that's the customer and that's the contact we know in there. So really use your own demo data.
What else?
I think in demo environments is, and this is a tricky one, we have for Dynamics 365 for sales, customer service, project service, field service. So you might be tempted to actually just activate all of them. I'm not really a big fan of this because then you really get a bloated feeling. You get customers who say, okay, it's nice that we have field service, but what should we do with it? It doesn't tell us anything. Why should we have it? So keep it simple, stupid. The KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. So don't just activate everything.
So can you tell me what's the difference in relationship, as in your role, if you like, with the customer as a pre-sales person as opposed to that of a salesperson?
For me, the pre-sales, so the salesperson is in our case, he's the first, what we like to call POC, so the point of contact. He's the identifier. He goes, he knows, like, okay, this is somebody, which issues or which challenges we might be able to solve with Dynamics 365 without really going into depth about entities and how are we going with their sales process and which maybe custom entities we'll create, without doing all that stuff. That comes in a second talk, and that's where I enter the picture. So where the salesperson does the general sales talk, and maybe also telling more about the company you work for, maybe telling more about Dynamics 365. I come in and talk about Dynamics 365 itself and maybe solutions which are revolving around it. So, okay, let's talk a bit about SharePoint because you need some document management system. Oh, but what are you going to do with your emails? So let's link Exchange with it. Okay, but maybe you're saying to me, okay, we need some more reporting. So let's talk about Power BI. So really thinking out a scenario which works for the customer. And at the end, I don't, and it's always a bit funny, but I don't talk pricing. For me, it's the solution, and I'll make an estimate. And this estimate will be based on, of course, the analysis and the talk we'll have. But I won't be the guy in which you'll be telling, oh, can't you just do a 5% discount? Because then we're really going for it. I'm really against it because I know our estimates are very honest. We know, okay, you want this will take this many hours to customize or this many hours to configure. So this is going to take this long and will cost this amount of money.
Excellent. Is there anything else?
That's for my case, it's the biggest difference between the two. I really, because I still do consultancy and project management, I really try to have my time only for people of which we are almost certain that they will be interested in Dynamics 365. For me personally, it would be a waste if I come to let's say you meet with a potential customer and they say at the end, they're really just saying, actually, well, we think we'll go with Salesforce because Dynamics, we don't really know it. Okay, so then for me, the sales guy hasn't been doing his job. He would really warm up the crowd if they would say, okay, we're still doubting between the two because, yeah, Salesforce does this and Dynamics does that. Okay, then I'm in the game and then we can really play and see how we can solve their needs.
So I read an article recently from Harvard Business Review, and it was titled, "To Improve Sales, Pay More Attention to Pre-Sales." And they say, and I quote, "Distinct from marketing and sales operations, pre-sales provides a specific set of activities that lead to qualifying, bidding on, winning, and renewing a deal." So what do you see as these specific activities are for Dynamics 365?
The article itself is quite interesting, and I think in that question is also a part of the answer. What's also in the article is that the key to closing deals is the pre-sales ability to shape the conversations with the client. So to position the company's solution as the ideal one. So that's not really talking about this or that, or what we like to call some smoke and mirrors pitch. Yeah, Dynamics will be able to do this, and Dynamics will be able to do that. No, really show them and give them a solution based on your understanding of their needs. So the activities you'll have to win those deals is like, and definitely in our business now, is we can say, okay, it's Dynamics 365, but you also have stuff like Office 365. You have stuff like SharePoint. So you have a lot of different tools that you can use for Dynamics 365. Sometimes we are too focused on Dynamics 365, and I have a lot of customers who say like, okay, Dynamics 365, and at the end of the road, the key to gaining their confidence wasn't Dynamics 365. It was actually talking about SharePoint, because they were looking for a document management system, and they're using now some old file server, and they want to get rid of it. And then often you're talking just about the totally wrong software, and maybe you're doing the totally wrong thing. So really understanding the client's needs, and I always tell this, sometimes you just need to say, well, Dynamics 365 isn't the solution for you yet. I like the yet because in the past we had a lot of questions. Okay, can Dynamics 365 do an entire ERP system? Does it have warehousing management? Does it have this? Does it have that? So then I'm thinking like, well, Dynamics 365 can't do this yet as we're evolving. I think it's in Q2 or Q1 of 2018 that financials, or however they're going to call it, will come out. So then you need to be, of course, as a Dynamics 365 consultant, aware of the solution and also to tell the people then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. So another takeaway from that article said, and I quote, souping up pre-sales engine can yield a 5-point improvement in conversion rate and a 6 to 13% improvement in revenue and a 10 to 20% improvement in the speed of moving prospects through the sales process. Those are some interesting numbers. What's your take on them?
I do think those numbers are probably correct because the article or the source of the article is really a good source. However, as our company or as our team are rather what I like to call the new kid on the block, me personally, I can't confirm these kinds of numbers. What I can tell you is that our team, for example, our revenue, as we have been spending more and more time, or as I have been spending more and more time on the pre-sale side, that our revenue has been or has grown by 78% in the last year. And the company itself, because of course our team isn't the only team, the company itself has grown at an average of 30% for the last, I think it's now 4 years. So we're definitely seeing more and more conversion on spending time in pre-sales and having a result in it. But to say that you have a 10 to 20% improvement of the speed of moving prospects to the sales process, for us that's a very hard one, because how do you measure the speed of moving prospects through the sales process? Sometimes we're having a pre-sales trajectory before, of course, the customer signs of years. And I think every sales guy listening can confirm this, it's usually just planting seeds. Maybe you're building up some trust here and you're doing something here, and maybe the time isn't right there yet, but maybe next year the prospect comes back and says, okay, do you remember last year when you shown us this? We didn't have the time yet back then, but we're interested in it now. And I must say that's something we're having now very much lately. Or how do you measure pre-sales? At what we like to call an existing customer. So it's already a customer, but maybe they're interested in having a new project with you. They have implemented Dynamics 365 for sales, but now you have been telling them or warming them up, look, we have Dynamics 365 for project service. That's really your kind of thing. You really need to do this. So that's sales to an existing customer. And I think that's the easiest sales, because you don't need to tell them who you are. You don't need to say how good you are, how big you are, how strong you are. No, they already know. Of course, and then I'm just trying to go full circle a little bit. Of course, if you have delivered a good project and have been a good consultant who delivered quality, who has been a craftsman with his trade, who has been delivering a nice project, a good Dynamics 365 environment.
So before we change topic, is there anything else you want to say on pre-sales?
No, I think we covered much of the pre-sales traject itself. As you said, pre-sales is a bit different for everybody, so I do hope I have given my own opinion about it. I'm looking forward maybe to some comments on how other people are looking towards it.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, let's switch gears now and let's look at Dynamics 365 practice growth. How do you go about scaling a Dynamics practice? I'm not just talking about the revenues that it can bring in, but as you have growth, there's a lot of other moving parts that have to change. What's your experience with a growing practice?
For me, at the moment, this is the biggest challenge I have. So, hands down, I'm just giving my own experience. Please, everybody, help me where you can. And for me, one thing we need to define is, what does it mean to scale the business? Does it mean having faster business? Does it mean having more customers, more projects, more revenue? How do you measure this? So that's for me one important thing. So you can really compare the same differences with each other. And then I think for me, the challenge is, what will I scale? And I think I have 3 things I need to look at. First, it's my product, which is in this case Dynamics 365 or more, or maybe if you have built it your own IP, then it's your own IP you might want to scale. So I'm thinking of the issues, I think it was Marika Söderstam, who was talking about her IP product. So I think she has some issues about how can we scale this, because she has more customers. And of course, if you have more customers, they might have a bit of different requirements. So how can you comply with those requirements? Second, for me, I think after the product, it's also a bit my personality. You have more people, so you have more personalities, people who think otherwise, or maybe, and which was in my case, a bit of micromanagement. I think the team itself needs to grow without having a micromanager. So you can drive the system or you can drive the scaling, but you really need to check your ego that you have enough room for everybody to grow. And then the third thing, so we had the product, we had the personality of the people in your team. And then I think you need to scale your, what I like to call the system. So the system is actually for us, it's our product which we sell. And at the end of the road, now that's Dynamics 365 consultancy. So at the end of the road, everybody has 8 hours in a day or 8 working hours. Of course, you have 24 hours in a day, but maybe you have 8 hours. And I'm not thinking that everybody wants to work 12 hours of Dynamics 365 consultancy in a day. So how do you go about that? And I think for me, the focus now is the system. It's the Dynamics 365 consultancy. I think if you have a great system, the consultancy, the people who are giving the consultancy, and if you combine this with a good product, which Dynamics 365 simply is, and if you have a nice consultant, you have a decent personality which comes and explains stuff to you, then I think you're really in for the win, and I think you really can scale it.
If you could create a list of must-dos for partners that want to grow their 365 practice, what would be on that list and why?
I'm rather curious to know how partners do it. I'm now doing 5 things, or I'm trying to do 5 things. One of them is think big. We're scaling, so think big. For our case, we are new on the block. We scale exponentially, but we need to check the quality. You can't compromise the quality. In my opinion, I have a vision on where we need to go about thinking big. Of course, I'm not going to fully divulge it here. I don't want to feed our competition, but I think we really need to think big. So that's one thing. I think a second one is celebrating. So if you're scaling, you're gaining new business. Maybe you're also losing business. So don't celebrate too long. Okay, yes, we want a big project now, but on to the next one. A third thing for me is working in and out of your business. What do I mean by that is, for me personally, I'm still having some difficulties micromanaging too much. So I'm working usually too much in the business. How did you create this field? And why did you create this field like this? And no, you shouldn't have done this. So now I'm trying to step more out of the business and trying to delegate more. A fourth to do for partners, if you want to grow, I think, is having the highest possible return on the optimal solution. What do I mean by that is sometimes and hands down we have made this mistake a few times too much, is we put what I like to call a band-aid on a wooden leg. You're trying to revive maybe a project which will never gain influence, which will never gain traction, then you're just wasting effort, and maybe just you're putting your eggs in the wrong solution. So really look like what's the best solution for the customer and look for that one. And I think a fifth one, and this is my pet project now, is leverage. To do for partners who want to grow, I think, is leverage. I don't have all the answers. I don't think you have all the answers, Mark, but you do have a lot more of them than me. But I think in your team, you need to have people to fill in the gaps in the knowledge you have. So the gaps in knowledge and the gaps in skills you have. So that might be looking for new people, but that might be looking for other solutions. I'm thinking about if you're a partner, don't build everything yourself. Look for partnerships with nice solutions. Just to mentioning two of them, I'm really happy with the Click Dimension solution. I think everybody knows it. If you're looking for a marketing solution, if you're looking for a connector, look for Kingsway Soft, look for Scribe. If you're looking for a mobile application, of course you can build it yourself, but look for a nice application like Resco Mobile, for instance. And no, I'm not paid by any of those, just thinking those are fine solutions.
Yeah, totally agree. So how do you measure practice growth?
For me, I'm bound by how does our company measure it? So those are annual revenue. I think that's one. Build hours, as we're now stepping away, but I think that might be another discussion. We're stepping away from billing all those hours and more project-wise. And I think practice growth also, and I think that's the big one for Microsoft at the moment. It's like, how much licenses did you sell?
Yeah. No, that is a common one. So how do you balance growth with other priorities like, adding new talent to your team, upskilling, bench time, recruitment, that type of thing?
Yeah, that's really the big question. I think if you can solve that one, having a balanced growth and really get everything in one line and growing with everything, having the right people on the right time. I think for our problem now is, of course, if you're benched, if you're not billable, of course, then you're actually sort of losing money. What I'm now trying to balancing out is I make what I like to call a 80% planning. So you have not quite sure if I pronounce it correctly, but you have the Pareto rule, which says like you have 80% or 20% from your activities, which result in 80%. I've done it a bit differently. I plan my consultants 8 days out of 10. Then they have 1 day which they have left for to-dos, follow-ups, whatever, which don't concern the other projects they're in or on. And then we leave 1 day open for something I like to call a pet project. Several people call it differently. I like to call it a pet project, which means what are they really interested by? What makes them warm? Why do they like to work with Dynamics? And for some people, it's like, okay, I want to build my own solution which does X, Y, Z. Okay, go ahead, build that solution. But maybe another person tells me, okay, it's great that we're doing this, but I want to get to be more informed about this. And I know you have been blogging about a bit of them, about some certificates. Maybe take the new field service certificate. Okay, maybe you're not working on a project which has field service, but if it interests you, okay, we'll make a day free so you can go ahead and learn it. So Excellent. Those are, for me, now how I try to balance the growth.
So one final question before we get onto some quickfire questions. What other revenue streams have you explored that can generate more income from a practice just outside of a consultant, swapping time for money?
Yeah, so for us, this moment, the main revenue stream is project revenue. So that's one. However, we are looking into or we are exploring new kinds of revenue as we're thinking, and more we're looking to recurring revenue. Because if you swap time for money, of course, you don't get that hour back. It's gone. Somebody paid for it. Okay, that's that. So we're looking into more recurring revenue. Those can be several things. We're looking into having more long-time agreements with our customers. So people who say like, okay, it's not a project. We'll see each other this many days for 5 years because we have trust, because we know we'll need it, and because our business is growing. So that's a more long-time agreement instead of a main revenue, which was project revenue. A second one is support agreements. Maybe you can sell your customer some support that you say like, okay, we'll be doing this, and you can call us. We will train you. However, you fill in support, that's up to you. And then we're looking into some new things. And that's why I find the interesting podcast with Marika is having those new IP. So new IP, building your own solution and selling it. And then, of course, you'll have subscription fees. So people who buy a subscription for your new IP. So I think it's really a new, for us, that's a new kind of revenue which we're looking into. But we're looking into several options. I think for us, and I know you had a wonderful conversation with, I think it was Neil Benson. For us, for instance, a new strategy might be, okay, let's talk about how are we going to implement Dynamics 365, because this will also have a big difference on how are we going to fill in those hours. If you're working pure sure step with the waterfall and you're looking more into Scrum, and I know if Neil would hear this, he would probably throw something at me because he was really, really big fan about Scrum. Then I think it's a whole different ballgame, because then your planning is entirely different. Your billable hours are entirely different. So it's a whole other way of looking at the projects and looking at the solutions you need to deliver.
So for our listeners, that all those podcasts that Koen's mentioned there, we're going to actually put in the show notes, as well as links to Neil Benson's Agile training course. Let's get on to some quick fire questions just to end. What books, blogs, or podcasts do you reckon most to people, and why?
I would recommend 3 books, and they're not you read this manual about Dynamics 365. I think there's lots of those, but I think if you really want to grow as a person, I think you really need to read The Obstacle is the Way of Ryan Holiday. It's a book which helped me a lot about, gaining that obstacle. The obstacle isn't always the obstacle. Sometimes it's the solution. So failure isn't the solution. So it really will give you a nice kick in the butt and really make you look at a few things differently. A second one for me is Deep Work by Cal Newport. The book is, and I think it really ties into the craftsmanship game, and they give a lot of examples in it, is we're always so distracted. I see a lot of people who have Skype open, they have their WhatsApp open, they have 10, 20, 30 things open when they are working at Dynamics 365. Really learn to work deeply, get really into the software, really focus, and your quality will go up really, really, really high. And a third one, and I was pretty surprised when I actually found it on your own Twitter, and I know you know the book, it's Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. I think really everybody needs to read it. I think it gives a good lessons about prioritizing, about leadership, about really stop saying, oh no, but didn't succeed because of X, Y, or Z. No, take extreme ownership about what you have done, why you've done it, and really step up your game.
Excellent. So what are your favorite apps and why?
Apps for me, I like to listen to SoundCloud. I'm in Belgium. Traffic is usually, we're always in traffic. It's Belgium. You're always in traffic. So instead of listening to the radio, just put up your SoundCloud, have some blog, have some really nice podcasts like yours, but I have been making too much promotion for yours. I think one other podcast, and it's always on for me. I'm not quite sure if you know it. It's The Art of Manliness.
The Art of Manliness.
The Art of Manliness. If you don't know it, you're thinking, what kind of strange thing is this? And yes, you can also listen to it if you're a woman. But the main goal of the podcast, and it's now on I think it's 350 episode, and they do a weekly one. So they have been doing it for quite some years. It's about making you as a man more whole, informing you about culture, ethics, about morality, about strength, about eating. It's about everything.
Awesome. Sounds good. Do you have any daily rituals that kind of set you on the right path for a successful day?
I know a lot of people then talk about morning rituals. I try not to have a morning ritual. As I said in the beginning, I know my morning ritual will be disturbed in a few months. So I don't think there's any good luck in having those. But I always, 2 things I try to keep in mind is I've once read a nice post, or there's a commencement speech about some American general I can send you if you want to, which goes about in the morning, make your own bed. Change the world by start making your own bed. So that's really important for me. And then another thing is never leave your house in anger. if you had some issues or you had some dealings with your wife or your kid, never leave the house in anger. As if something would happen, you'll never forgive yourself. And then that's my morning. And in the evening, read. Always read. Expand your mind. Read books. Maybe the books we said a little bit earlier. And make your attack plan for the next day. If you have a whole day nothing to do tomorrow, then you will do nothing. If you have a really good idea of what you're going to do, okay, then you will have a lot accomplished at the end of the next day.
Yeah, agreed. What recommendations do you have for people wanting a career in Dynamics?
Career as in sales, pre-sales, consultancy, project management?
Anything.
Get to know the product. Get hands-on. Everybody can start a demo, and there's a lot, and I mean a lot of opportunities in the Dynamics 365 world. I think every good Dynamics 365 consultant can quit tomorrow and start somewhere else the next day after. So just get with it, because it's really there's a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of expanding world. Microsoft is really putting a lot of business behind it, putting a lot of money in it. So if you want a career in Dynamics or selling Dynamics, is really get on with the product.
Excellent. If you could redo anything in your career so far, what would it be?
As some of your earlier guests, I don't really believe in what you like to call redos. I think, and one of the books I mentioned, the Obstacle is the Way, it's about stoicism. It's about things are now what they need to be for some reason, so get on with it.
Excellent. Who do you recommend as a guest for a future podcast?
I'm not quite sure if one of the next two has already been there. I was really impressed with Adam Vero, one of Microsoft's MVP. And the other one I would maybe love to hear. There was the guy I originally got my first Dynamics 365 training from, is the Feridun Kadir from the UK. I would really love to hear some of those on your podcast.
Excellent. Koen, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I've learnt so much. Before you go, if people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
They can just find me on LinkedIn. I'm not into Twitter. I don't have Facebook, but I do have LinkedIn. I'm always connectable over there. And another possible solution is just looking for me on my blog, which is the CRM Giant. So you can always find me over there, but feel free to connect with me, LinkedIn, and maybe comment on your blog post so we can really get in touch.
Well, thank you for that. This has been a Dynamics 365 podcast focusing on the ingredients of successful Dynamics 365 practice. Your host was Business Solution MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. For more information on this interview, show notes, feedback, and resources mentioned, or if you know someone who would be a great guest for future episodes, please go to nz365guy.com/podcast. Also, check out the other great Dynamics 365 podcasts on CRM audio, like the following.
Hi, I'm Britta.
And I'm Matt, and some people call us the morning show of the CRM audio network.
Is it because we're the happy chipper ones?
Must be. Either that or it sounds like I have a future talking about traffic and weather.
Well, it's certainly not because we record in the morning.
I think it's because we jam-pack so much Dynamics 365 goodness into 30 minutes or less.
Probably, and because we do it all for the end users and the system admins.
Sounds good to me. And if that sounds good to you out there in podcast land, you can listen in at implementthis.org.